Zoe Maxwell was, by all academic measurements, a complete disaster. This wasn't exactly news to her professors at Nebula Academy, the most prestigious interspecies educational facility in the Orion Arm. It wasn't news to her classmates either, especially not to her roommate Vix, a fox-like Arcturian with 6 tails and a photographic memory who never shut up about her perfect grade point average. You know, Vix chittered as she organized her already immaculate study materials. At some point, the administrators are going to realize they made a clerical error when they admitted you. Zoe looked up from her tablet where she'd been frantically cramming for tomorrow's xenochemistry final. Thanks for the vote of confidence. I'm merely stating statistical probabilities. Vix's ears twitched. Humans rarely qualify for Nebula. You're the only one in our class of 300. Yeah. The great cosmic mistake. Zoe rubbed her eyes. Maybe they needed a control group for failure. She wasn't wrong about the failure part. Zoe was behind in every subject. Xenobiology? She couldn't tell a Zolaxian spleen from an appendix. Advanced quantum mechanics. The only thing she was certain about was her own uncertainty. Theoretical astrophysics? Theoretically, she was going to fail that too. Professor Krill, a 17-limbed mollusk who taught interstellar diplomacy, had once described her work as so spectacularly misguided it might accidentally start a war with the Crab Nebula. Professor Ort, a gaseous cloud being who floated through the halls dispensing wisdom and noxious fumes in equal measure, had suggested she might be better suited for a career that doesn't require thinking, breathing, or existing in this dimension. Only Professor Marlowe, the aging human instructor of comparative humanities, showed any faith in her. You have a different kind of intelligence, Zoe, he'd told her last week. One that might not show up on standardized tests. Is there a job market for different kinds of intelligence? She'd asked. Because my student loans are very traditionally structured. The truth was, Zoe had always been a hands-on learner trapped in a theoretical world. While her classmates absorbed lectures like the Voraxians absorb solar radiation, efficiently and with a slight greenish glow, Zoe needed to touch, build, break, and fix to understand anything. Unfortunately, Nebula Academy believed in the power of virtual simulations rather than messy real-world experience. With finals week approaching, Zoe was looking at a perfect record of imperfection, all Fs across the board. Her one saving grace was that getting expelled would at least save her the embarrassment of failing her exams. Quiz me, Vix demanded, interrupting Zoe's spiral of self-pity. On what? What? Anything. Everything. I need to maintain my perfect record. Zoe sighed and picked up a random flashcard. Described the chemical composition of, I can't even pronounce this. Krylothian digestive acid, Vix answered instantly. A complex mixture of hydrochloric acid, sulfuric compounds, and specialized enzymes capable of breaking down metallic compounds and certain types of plastics. Its pH is from -2 to -4, depending on the Krylothian's diet. Show off, Zoe muttered. The Academy's central spire suddenly pulsed red, and a melodious alarm began to sound. Attention students and faculty, came the calm voice of Navi, the Academy's AI. This is not a drill. Actually, wait, this is a drill. A fire drill. Please proceed to your designated evacuation points in an orderly fashion. Now? Zoe groaned. I'm never going to pass at this rate. Little did she know that passing her exams would soon be the least of her problems. The corridors of Nebula Academy filled with a menagerie of irritated students. Multi-limbed Octavians slithered alongside hovering Luminites. Trill folk vibrated with annoyance at frequencies that made Zoe's teeth ache. A pack of Luparians wolf-like beings with metallic fur growled about interrupted study sessions. This is highly inefficient, Vix complained as they joined the exodus. My schedule had precisely 0 minutes allocated for evacuation procedures today. Oh no, your precious schedule, Zoe rolled her eyes. How will the universe survive? Professor Gren, a tall, thin being with skin like polished emerald, was attempting to direct traffic at an intersection. His crystalline vocal apparatus shattered the air with sharp commands. Single file. No teleporting, shimmer students. Gravitationally challenged students, please maintain standard altitude. No, Blobthar, you cannot absorb smaller students to move faster. Zoe noticed Professor Marlowe leaning against a wall, looking oddly concerned. Unlike the other faculty members who were frantically consulting protocol manuals, he was scanning the crowd with narrowed eyes. Something's wrong, Zoe muttered. Obviously, Vix replied. This drill is interrupting exactly 73 minutes of optimal study time. No, I mean something's really wrong. Look at Marlowe. Vix followed her gaze. Human intuition is statistically unreliable. And yet, Zoe pointed, why are the security drones not following evacuation protocol? The Academy's security drones, sleek, gunmetal constructs that usually patrolled the perimeter, were indeed behaving oddly. Instead of guiding students toward evacuation points, they were moving inward, toward the Academy's central core. A Galuvian student named Plosh oozed up beside them, his translucent body pulsing with anxious blue lights. My olfactory sensors are detecting unusual pheromones, non-Academy signatures. Translation for the smellingly impaired, Zoe asked. Someone's here who shouldn't be, Plosh clarified, his voice bubbling. The evacuation route took them past the quantum labs. Zoe noticed the door was slightly ajar, a security violation that would normally trigger immediate lockdown. Through the crack, she glimpsed movement. Not the familiar blue uniforms of Academy staff, but dark, form-fitting suits with reflective visors. Guys, she whispered, pulling Vix and Plosh aside, I think we're being. The lights cut out, plunging the corridor into darkness. Emergency illumination kicked in seconds later, bathing everything in an eerie red glow. The melodious alarm shifted to a harsh, pulsing wail. Attention students and faculty. Navi's voice had changed, becoming stilted and mechanical. Please continue evacuation procedures. This is definitely still a normal fire drill and not a security breach. There is no cause for alarm. Repeat, no cause for alarm. That's reassuring, Zoe muttered. A deafening explosion rocked the West Wing. The crowd of students shifted from irritated to panicked in an instant. A stampede of various appendages, tentacles, hooves, paws, and tendrils surged toward the nearest exit. Remain calm. Professor Gren's voice shattered through the chaos. Follow evacuation proto. His words cut off as a shimmering energy net descended over him, constricting around his crystalline form. From a side corridor, 5 figures in those same dark suits emerged, wielding weapons Zoe had never seen before. Priority targets identified, one of them announced. Voice distorted through their helmet, a commence collection. Zoe grabbed Vix and Plosh, pulling them into a maintenance alcove as chaos erupted. Those are collectors, she hissed. Impossible. Vix's fur stood on end. The Academy has 17 layers of security, all of which conveniently failed during a fire drill, Zoe pointed out. Through the panicked crowd, they watched as the collectors systematically targeted specific students, a crystalline thought weaver, a pair of rare quasar twins, a chronoshifter still in its larval stage. They're after rare species, Plosh burbled, shrinking into himself. Which means you're on the shopping list, Zoe told him. Galuvians were prized for their regenerative properties and natural bioluminescence. A security barrier suddenly slammed down behind them, sealing off the evacuation route, and more barriers descended throughout the corridor, dividing the fleeing students into manageable groups. We're trapped, Vix whispered, her usual confidence evaporating. No, Zoe corrected grimly, as she watched a collector approaching their section with a scanner in hand. We're being herded. The collector's scanner emitted a high-pitched whine as it swept over the huddled students. Behind his reflective visor, Zoe could see nothing of his features, but his posture radiated cold efficiency. 6 priority specimens identified in this section, he announced into his comm, preparing for extraction. Zoe counted their group herself, Vix, Plosh, and about 20 other students representing a dozen different species. Several were rare specimens indeed, Trill, whose neural pathways could be harvested for organic computing, luminites, whose cellular structure contained natural fusion reactions, and Vix herself. An Arcturian whose multiple tails weren't just for show but housed separate auxiliary brains capable of parallel processing. "Why aren't they just grabbing us?" whispered Dilko, a salamander-like ignition whose skin occasionally flickered with actual flames when he was stressed. "Like now?" "They're being methodical," Zoe replied, observing the collector's movements. "They've sectioned off the academy. They're cataloguing before collecting, which means we have a little time." "Time for what?" Vix hissed. "To contemplate which alien zoo we'll end up in?" "To escape, obviously." "The collectors have a 99.7% success rate," Vix recited nervously. "Their technology is centuries beyond typical security countermeasures." "Where are the professors?" asked Cretix, a mantis-like student whose exoskeleton was clicking anxiously. "Where are the proper authorities?" Through a nearby window, Zoe could see other sections of the academy. Barriers had dropped everywhere, creating isolated pockets. In some areas she could see faculty members attempting to override security systems. In others, collectors were already loading captured specimens into hovering stasis pods. "We're on our own," she concluded. "We're doomed," corrected Trill, their voice vibrating at anxiety frequencies. Zoe's brain was working overtime. The collectors had clearly compromised Navi, the Academy's AI system. They'd triggered the fire drill to get everyone moving. They'd cut communications her neural link to the Academy network was dead, and they'd isolated potential targets with the security barriers. It was, Zoe had to admit, a pretty solid plan. The kind of plan she might have come up with herself if she were, evil. The collector finished his scan and stepped back. To begin extraction in 5 minutes. Section 12B secured. As he moved away, Zoe slid toward a maintenance panel near the floor. "Everyone shut up and let me think." "What are you doing?" Vix demanded. "Searching for options that don't involve us becoming exotic pets." "There are no options." Vix's whisper was frantic. "The statistical probability of—" "I don't care about statistics. I care about not getting collected today." The panel came loose with a soft click. Behind it was a tangle of wiring the Academy's redundant systems for when the main networks failed. Zoe had spent more time in these maintenance tunnels than in actual classes. Not because she was studying them, but because they made excellent napping spots when she was skipping lectures. "Okay, here's what I know," she whispered to the group. "These barriers operate on independent circuits. They're designed to contain fires or chemical spills, not to keep determined students in or out." "But the collectors have overridden the controls," said Plosh, his gelatinous form quivering. "Yes, but they can't have overridden physics." Zoe studied the wiring. "Each barrier needs power. Cut the power. Barrier goes bye-bye." "And then what?" demanded Vix. "We run into the arms of the next collector?" Zoe ignored her, focusing on the wires, red for emergency systems, blue for data transmission, green for something she couldn't remember from basic engineering, a class she'd mostly slept through. "Yellow might be auxiliary power?" "Screw it," she muttered, and yanked on all of them at once. Several things happened simultaneously. The lights in their section went completely dead, the security barrier flickered and collapsed, and the floor-cleaning drones in the corridor suddenly activated, their cheerful cleaning music creating an absurd soundtrack to their predicament. "Move," Zoe commanded, crawling through the maintenance opening. "Maintenance tunnels connect this whole wing." "Those are not designed for student access," Vix protested, even as she followed. Complaint noted. Zoe kept crawling. "Anyone with more than 4 limbs. Help the others. Anyone who emits light or heat. You're our headlamps. Anyone who can sense collectors through walls. Take point." To her surprise, the panicked students organized themselves with remarkable efficiency. Trill's natural bioluminescence provided soft blue light. Cretix used his extra limbs to help less dexterous students navigate the narrow passage. Dilko's stress-induced flame flickers weren't ideal, but they helped illuminate junctions. Behind them, They could hear the collector's angry shout, Section 12B compromised. Specimens escaping through maintenance systems. Where are we going? Plosh asked, his liquid body flowing easily through the tunnel. Zoe hadn't thought that far ahead. Somewhere with fewer collectors and more weapons, she decided. Any suggestions? The xenobiology lab, offered critics. Professor Mulu keeps some rather dangerous specimens there. The engineering workshop, countered Dilko, tools, equipment, potential weapons. The quantum physics lab, suggested Vix. If we can access the experimental phase shift technology. The cafeteria, said Zoe. Food, potential implements, central location, multiple exits. They all stared at her. I spend a lot of time there avoiding classes, she explained. Trust me, I know every entrance and exit. A metallic screech echoed through the tunnel as something began cutting through the maintenance shaft behind them. Cafeteria it is, agreed Vix. The cafeteria of Nebula Academy wasn't just a place to refuel various biological systems, it was a marvel of cross-species accommodation. 17 different atmospheric bubbles allowed creatures with incompatible breathing requirements to dine together. Food dispensers catered to everything from photosynthesizers to pure carnivores. The central area featured gravity plates that could be adjusted for comfort. It was also, as Zoe had promised, equipped with multiple exits including service corridors, waste disposal chutes, and atmospheric vents large enough for most students to crawl through. Okay, we made it, Zoe whispered as they emerged through a service entrance. The cafeteria appeared empty, though emergency lighting cast strange shadows across the various dining sections. Now what? Every face and some appendages that served as faces turned toward her. Why are you all looking at me? She demanded. You got us this far. Plosh burbled. Temporarily, she corrected. I'm the academy screw-up, remember? I'm failing every subject. And yet, Vix's whiskers twitched thoughtfully, you've displayed more practical knowledge in the past 15 minutes than in an entire semester of classes. Zoe blinked. That's almost a compliment. It's an observation. A distant crash echoed through the corridors. The collectors were methodically searching each section. They'll find us eventually. Cretix's mandibles clicked nervously. This facility has limited space. Then we need to stop running and start fighting, Zoe decided. She surveyed the cafeteria with new eyes, seeing not just a dining hall but a potential arsenal. Okay, brain trust. Time to apply some of that theoretical knowledge to a practical problem. Which is? Asked Trill. How to weaponize a cafeteria against technologically advanced kidnappers. The students exchanged glances. The environmental controls for the atmospheric bubbles, suggested Vic slowly. If reconfigured, they could create localized pressure differentials. The waste disposal unit, added Cretix, its molecular disassembler could be repurposed. The nutrient synthesizers, Plosh's body pulsed with excitement. They contain base chemical compounds that, if combined incorrectly but safely, Zoe amended, could produce various defensive substances. Dilko's skin flared with actual flames. The gravity plates could be reversed. For the first time, Zoe felt a glimmer of hope. These weren't just scared students, they were the brightest minds from dozens of worlds. And apparently, when faced with a practical application, they could think beyond textbooks. All right, she said. Let's form teams. Vix, take anyone with engineering knowledge and work on those environmental controls. Cretix, you're on waste disposal. Plosh, chemistry is all yours. Dilko, gravity team, I'll coordinate and keep watch. What's the overall strategy? Vix asked. Zoe grinned. We're going to turn this cafeteria into the galaxy's most elaborate trap, and then we're going to invite the collectors in for lunch. As the students dispersed to their tasks, Zoe took a moment to marvel at how quickly they'd accepted her leadership. Maybe it was desperation. Maybe it was the human tendency to take charge in crises, a trait she'd never particularly demonstrated before. Or maybe, just maybe, she wasn't as terrible at all this academic stuff as her grades suggested. She moved between the groups, watching them work. Vix had opened an environmental control panel and was rewiring it with astonishing speed, her 6 tails acting as additional manipulators. Plosh was at the nutrient synthesizer, his gelatinous body shifting colors as he processed chemical formulas. Kretix had disassembled the waste unit with surgical precision. "How's it going?" Zoe asked, peering over Vix's shoulder. "I've reconfigured 3 atmospheric bubbles," Vix replied. "When activated, they'll create a vacuum zone at the main entrance." "Will that stop the collectors?" "It will delay them and potentially compromise their environmental suits." Zoe nodded. "Good. We need layers of defense." She moved to Plosh's station. Chemistry report. Plosh's body rippled with excitement. "I've synthesized a compound that, when exposed to oxygen, produces a fast-expanding foam, harmless but extremely sticky and opaque, perfect for blocking visors and gumming up equipment." Kretix had constructed what looked like a small cannon from cafeteria parts. "Improvised pressure launcher," he explained, "low velocity, but sufficient to deploy Plosh's chemical packages at a distance." Dilko's team had removed panels from the floor, exposing the gravity controls. "We can create gravity wells," he explained, his salamander-like features animated, and not enough to crush, but enough to seriously disorient. Zoe surveyed their work with growing amazement. In less than 20 minutes, these theoretical students had created a functional defense system from cafeteria equipment, all because they had a practical problem to solve rather than an exam to pass. "We need communication," she realized, "something the collectors can't intercept." I can help with that," offered Trill, their crystalline structure vibrating slightly. "My species communicates through subsonic vibrations transmitted through solid surfaces." "You can send messages through the floor?" "Essentially, yes. It won't work between rooms separated by open space, but within this cafeteria." "Perfect." Zoe clapped her hands together. "Okay, final check. Trap set?" The students nodded. "Communications ready?" Trill vibrated affirmatively. Escape routes identified." 3 viable options," confirmed Vix, pointing to the service corridor, a ventilation shaft, and a dumbwaiter designed for heavy food containers. "Then we're as ready as we'll ever be." Zoe took a deep breath. "Now we need to make some noise." The collectors arrived exactly as expected, methodically, efficiently, and completely unprepared for what awaited them. "Life signs detected," announced the lead collector as his team approached the cafeteria's main entrance. "Multiple species. Priority targets confirmed." Zoe watched from her hiding spot behind an overturned serving table. The cafeteria appeared empty and dim, emergency lights creating pools of red illumination amid deep shadows. From various concealed positions, her improvised defense team waited for her signal. The first collector stepped through the doorway and immediately triggered Vix's atmospheric trap. The localized pressure differential created a momentary vacuum that made his environmental suit buckle inward. Not enough to crush him, but enough to throw him off balance and damage some of his equipment. "Atmospheric anomaly," he warned, but his companions were already entering behind him. Zoe tapped twice on the floor. Through the solid surface, Trill transmitted the vibration to Dilko's team at the gravity controls. The floor beneath the collectors suddenly seemed to tilt 45 degrees, sending them staggering. The perception of down shifted dramatically, while the students, stationed on unaffected areas, maintained their balance. "Now, Plosh," Zoe called. Kretix fired the improvised launcher. A capsule of Plosh's special compound burst against the lead collector's visor, immediately expanding into a sticky, opaque foam that covered his helmet. The collector's curses were muffled as he clawed at his visor. 2 more capsules found their marks, leaving 3 collectors temporarily blinded. "Target their weapons," Zoe directed. The next volley focused on the collector's arms and equipment. Soon their sleek energy weapons were encased in rapidly hardening foam. But the collectors weren't easily defeated. The two who had avoided the foam barrage raised secondary weapons, neural disruptors designed to incapacitate without damaging valuable specimens. "It's out," Zoe commanded. Trill transmitted the signal to the team controlling the emergency lighting. The cafeteria plunged into total darkness, total for everyone except Trill's species, who perceived vibrational patterns, and the Luminites, who generated their own light. In the darkness, guided by these light-producing students, Zoe's team executed the next phase. The cafeteria's automated cleaning drones, reprogrammed by one of Vix's engineering students, swarmed around the collector's legs, her usual gentle polishing pads replaced with abrasive materials that began damaging the collector's environmental suits. "Retreat and regroup," ordered the lead collector, his voice distorted through the phone. That's when Zoe triggered the final trap. The doors to the cafeteria slammed shut, controlled by an override that Vix had rigged to the emergency systems. Simultaneously, the waste disposal unit modified by Cretix began pumping its specially prepared contents into the room, a harmless but foul-smelling slurry that coated the floor and made it impossibly slippery. The collectors, attempting to retreat, found themselves sliding uncontrollably. Their advanced technology, their energy nets, their neural disruptors, their communication systems proved useless against good old-fashioned chaos. "This is undignified," shouted one collector as he skidded into a table of gelatinous nutrient cubes, becoming hopelessly entangled. "Agreed," replied Zoe, emerging from her hiding spot as emergency lights flickered back on. "But so is kidnapping students for the exotic pet trade." The lead collector, still half blinded by foam, pointed what he thought was a weapon, but was actually a cafeteria serving utensil at her. This facility was supposed to be secured. Our intelligence indicated minimal resistance capacity. "Yeah, well, your intelligence didn't account for desperate students applying theoretical knowledge to a practical problem." Zoe gestured around at her team, who were now emerging from their positions, looking both terrified and triumphant. "Turns out we're pretty good at that." One of the collectors managed to activate his emergency beacon, a device that would summon their ship for extraction. "You've only delayed the inevitable," he snarled. "Our main force will arrive within minutes." Zoe smiled. "That's what I'm counting on." On cue, the Academy's actual alarms began to sound, not the fake fire drill, but the genuine security alert. Through the cafeteria windows, they could see Academy security vessels converging on the building. "While you were chasing us," Zoe explained, "Trill here was sending vibrations through the building's structural supports. Old-school Morse code, detailing your positions and numbers. Turns out Professor Marlowe recognized it. He served on a human vessel that used it as backup communication." The collectors looked at each other in dawning comprehension. "You didn't disable all the Academy's communications," Zoe continued, "just the obvious ones. And now the real authorities are here, and you're covered in stinky goo and stuck to the floor." The sound of security forces breaching the Academy's outer doors echoed through the corridors. "You know what the funny thing is?" Zoe said conversationally as they waited for rescue. "I'm failing every subject at this academy, quantum physics, xenobiology, astroengineering, all of it, but today I finally figured out why." The lead collector, resigned to his fate, surprisingly asked, "Why?" "Because I needed to see the point of it all. I needed a problem to solve, not just theories to memorize." She looked around at her fellow students with newfound appreciation. We all did. 3 weeks later, Zoe stood uncomfortably on the main stage of Nebula Academy's grand auditorium, facing the assembled student body, faculty, and a surprising number of journalists from across the galaxy. And for displaying exceptional resourcefulness, leadership, and practical application of academic principles, intoned Chancellor Zex, a being composed primarily of sentient gas contained within an ornate mechanical frame. "We present Zoe Maxwell with the Academy's highest honor, the Stellar Achievement Award." The audience erupted in tentacle-waving, appendage-stomping applause. "Additionally," continued the Chancellor MS, "Maxwell's final grades have been adjusted to reflect her demonstrated mastery of the curriculum through practical application." Vix, sitting in the front row, gave Zoe 6-tailed thumbs up. Would you like to say a few words? The Chancellor asked, floating aside to give Zoe the podium. Zoe stepped forward, tugging at the formal academic robe that felt entirely too dignified for someone who, until recently, had been the Academy's most reliable failure. So, she began, turns out I'm not actually terrible at everything. Who knew? A ripple of laughter moved through the crowd. 3 weeks ago, I was about to flunk out of the most prestigious academy in the galaxy. Today, I'm apparently some kind of hero, she shrugged. The difference wasn't knowledge, it was application. She glanced at Professor Marlowe, who nodded encouragingly. I didn't suddenly become smart during that siege. I just finally found a reason to use what I'd absorbed through academic osmosis. Turns out, humans don't learn best by memorizing theories, we learn by doing, by solving, by facing actual problems. She gestured to her fellow students who had been trapped in the cafeteria with her. And it wasn't just me. Everyone contributed. Everyone applied their knowledge in ways no exam could measure. The Chancellor's containment suit hissed softly, and what Zoe had learned was their equivalent of thoughtful consideration. Therefore, Zoe concluded, I have a suggestion for curriculum reform. Less simulation, more application, fewer exams, more problems to solve. Because when the collectors come, metaphorically or literally, theory alone won't save us. There was a moment of silence, followed by thunderous approval from the students and more measured applause from the faculty. Later, at the reception, Vix approached her with an expression that, on an Arcturian, might have been respect. Congratulations on your academic resurrection, Vix said. Although statistically speaking, your performance during the siege was likely an anomaly. Thanks for the vote of confidence, Zoe replied, sipping something that might have been punch but tasted suspiciously like diluted cleaning fluid. However, Vix continued, her 6 tails twitching in what Zoe now recognized as embarrassment. Your suggestion to the Chancellor has merit. I'd been reflecting on my own performance during the crisis. Oh, whoa. Despite my perfect academic record, I was not optimally functional under pressure. You were. Zoe grinned. Are you asking me to be your crisis management tutor? I'm proposing a mutual educational exchange. I can assist with theoretical knowledge, you can provide practical application insights. Deal. Zoe clinked her glass against Vix's. Though fair warning, my study methods involve a lot of naps and snack breaks. Professor Marlowe joined them, his weathered human face creased in a smile. I see the Academy's most unlikely duo is forming an alliance. Academic exchange program, Vix corrected primly. Friendship, Zoe translated. We're trying friendship. Marlowe nodded approvingly. The Academy's board has fast-tracked your curriculum proposal, by the way. Starting next semester, all courses will include practical application components. Really? Zoe was genuinely surprised. Nothing motivates institutional change like almost having your student body abducted by interstellar poachers. Marlowe's eyes twinkled. Plus, the publicity has been excellent. Applications from humans have increased 3,000%. Great. Zoe sighed. So now I'm responsible for an influx of humans who think they can coast through classes and then save the day when trouble strikes. Isn't that exactly what you did? Vix inquired innocently. Well, yes, but I didn't know I was going to be good at it. As they bantered, Zoe caught sight of Plosh, Kretix, Dilko and Trill across the room, each receiving their own commendations from admirers and faculty. From failures and academic misfits to heroes in one afternoon. All because a fire drill turned into a siege, and theory finally met practice. You know, she told Marlowe and Vix, I'm actually looking forward to next semester now. The statistical probability of another collector incursion is extremely low, Vix noted. That's not what I mean. Zoe smiled. I finally found the point of all this knowledge. It's not just for passing tests, it's for solving problems, and the universe has no shortage of those. Marlowe raised his glass. To practical applications. To unexpected heroes, added Vix. To fire drills that aren't actually drills, Zoe concluded with a grin. May they always happen during subjects I'm failing.